Chapter 23. A familiar stranger. That night changed everything. Ferry could tell. None of his friends mentioned it again. But no matter how hard they tried to pretend nothing happened, once the night settled, they would look behind and throb at the smallest sound. Ferry knew they were afraid. If he was used to meeting creatures from other worlds, his friends were not. This time, however, even Ferry was worried. That stranger, whoever or whatever it was, gave him the coldest chills. Now his biggest concern was that it might hurt his friends. Then one morning, something happened. Something that chased away any fears or worries, if only for a while. Winter had come. Ferry hated winter. He couldn't understand other children's joy of playing in the snow, having snowball fights, and building snowmen. To him, winter meant getting his nose and cheeks frozen, even when bundled up from head to toe. The cold was getting through his clothes, and no matter how many sweaters he put on, it reached him to the bone. His friends, however, could spend an entire day in the snow. Every morning, they greeted him with a shower of snowballs. Then they had to follow a narrow path to school through the snowbanks. And their winter adventure continued on their way back home. But not even the winter could erase the memory of that night. Soon Matilda and Ben kept away from staying outside late. From the first moments of darkness, they rushed home, always looking behind. Always afraid. "Ferry, why don't you come outside?" May asked softly during a break, one of those winter days. She stood there with her pink cap and gloves on. "I'm a bit cold," he said, pretending to cough. She smiled. "You could use some fresh air," she said. Ferry frowned. "Why don't you go play with your friends, May?" he snapped. "Go play with Billy. I'm sure you have a lot in common. Now leave me alone." May looked shocked for a moment, then ran out of the classroom with tears in her eyes. Ferry felt miserable. He had to do it. He had to keep her away. What if that thing was watching him right now? He couldn't put May in danger too. Within days, Ferry turned even grumpier. He stopped visiting Ben. He turned Matilda down every time she asked him to play. Instead, he pretended he had to help his mum, do homework, or that he wasn't feeling well. "Listen, Ferry," Matilda confronted him one day. "I'm sick and tired of being pushed away." "What's wrong with you?" "Nothing's wrong," he muttered. "Oh no, something is going on. And you're going to tell me right now," she demanded, pouting. "Or what? Are you going to kick me like you always do to solve your problems?" he said, forcing a laugh. For a moment, Matilda turned speechless, giving Ferry a chance to run. He was always a little scared of her and her temper. At home, he rushed to his room, took off his school bag and coat, and threw himself on the bed. He just stared at the ceiling. A knock at the window startled him. It was his raven. Ferry opened the window and offered him some breadcrumbs from a box he kept under the bed. Since that Hallows Eve night, the raven followed him everywhere. He could hear him croaking above on his way to school and see him at his class's window, swinging on a branch. Even the biggest blizzard couldn't stop that bird. Night after night, he would hear his wings fluttering at his window, and the sound of them made him feel safe, somehow. But no matter how hard he tried to hide it, his mother's sharp eyes noticed the change in him. "Is there something wrong, dear?" she asked him one evening when she came to say goodnight. "It's nothing, Mum," he said quietly, not daring to look into her eyes. How could he tell her what was bothering him without revealing he wasn't really her child? His mother sighed and placed a soft kiss on his forehead. "If you ever want to talk to me, I am here," she said before leaving his room. And the days passed by, one after another, all the same. With each day, Ferry felt more distant from his friends and everything he once loved. His only comfort was knowing he wasn't putting anyone in danger anymore. Not even the winter holiday, his very first one, could lift his spirits. One afternoon, while he was staring out the window as usual, a soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. A girl from your class is here to see you, his mother said from behind him. Go away, Matt, Ferry said without turning around. It's not Matt, a small, soft voice replied. It was May, holding her knitted cap. Actually, Matt sent me here to talk to you, she said. She says you're not talking to anyone anymore, and that I'm the only one you might want to see. May took a few steps closer, then sat on the edge of a chair near the window. She waited for him to say something, but Ferry was so surprised to see her there, he didn't know what to say. It's hard, he eventually said. I have a secret I can't tell to anyone, and that makes me feel like a coward. May watched him without blinking. Ferry had never seen her so serious. Listen, she said, I don't know what your secret is. If you don't want to tell, that's fine. But let me tell you this, you are not a coward. You're the bravest person I've ever known. You're not afraid to speak your mind. You're curious and willing to learn about everything. And you have a big heart. I wish I could be more like you. Not to care what people think. But I'm not like that. Brave enough to face anything. She suddenly stood up, looking determined. Now get dressed. We're going sledding. She then went out, slowly closing the door behind her. Ferry stood still for a few moments. Then in the blink of an eye, he was all dressed and ready. Can I go play with May, Mum? He asked. Eileen smiled. All right, but don't stay out too long. It's getting dark soon. Outside, May picked up the rope of a small sled with a blanket on it, waiting for them in the front garden. It was fit for only 2 children. Where to? Ferry asked, blowing on his fists to keep warm. To the snow slope, of course, May replied, smiling. Ferry followed her, and suddenly, winter didn't seem so harsh anymore. He looked at the cotton clouds above and the snow-coated branches, from which a fine, sparkling powder fell. Like fairy dust, he thought. May herself looked like a little fairy in her red winter coat, a rosebud against the pristine snow. Without realizing it, they arrived at the hill near Shepherd's Forest. May took off her gloves and stretched out her hand toward him. Ferry did the same. He took May's hand, and they climbed the hill together. Her hands were cold from playing in the snow, but they gradually warmed up from his touch. Ferry forgot about the cold. All he felt was the warmth embracing him with every step. The climb was difficult. The snow had fallen heavily lately, and the snowbanks reached their knees. May fell often, and Ferry helped her up each time, dusting the snow off her clothes. Then they kept going. When they reached the top, the shadows of night were already falling over the trees. At the top of the hill, Ferry felt his worries fade. They could hear their own laughter, muffled as if they had cotton in their ears. May's cheeks and nose turned red like cherries. Everything around them was white and quiet. Only the croak of Fairy's raven broke the silence, reminding them they weren't alone. What now? Asked Ferry. Now we climb on the sledge and let go, May said. Haven't you been sledding before? No, but it must be great. Then what are you waiting for? May sat in front, holding the sledge's rope. They wrapped themselves in the blanket, took a deep breath, and let go. The sledge sped down the hill, ice needles stinging their cheeks. The children giggled and laughed, their laughter carried by the wind all the way to the forest, where unseen eyes watched. The entire time, Ferry felt as if the small sledge was floating over a sea of snow, carried away on the wings of the wind. He wished the day would never end. When night finally took over the last patches of light, the children reached the bottom of the hill. They fell off the sledge into the soft snow and lay there, staring at the sky. Ferry couldn't feel the cold anymore, only the warmth. They headed back to town when the night shadows had fully settled, the snow creaking under their feet. When they arrived in front of May's house, it was already dark. Thank you for today, Ferry said. You don't have to thank me, said May, smiling. That's what friends are for. She waved at him before going inside her house. Ferry smiled back and started home. He felt like he was flying. It had been the best day. He wasn't far from May's house when he heard footsteps behind him. The memory of Hallows Eve came back, stronger than ever. This time, he decided to face the danger. But instead of the faceless creature, he saw Billy Pride emerging from the darkness. "What is it, Ferry? Are you scared? You look paler than usual," Billy said, laughing. "What do you want, Billy? I see you and May have become best friends," he said, trying to look indifferent, though his voice betrayed him. "It's none of your business," Ferry snapped, trying to move forward. But Billy blocked his way. "I wonder what May would say if she saw that scary face of yours looking even scarier," he spat. Billy pulled a shiny object from his pocket and pointed it at Ferry. An iron key. So harmless to others. So dangerous to him. "Do you know what this is?" "It's a key. An iron key, to be exact. I'm curious what it could do to your skin," Billy smirked, stepping closer. Ferry knew all too well what iron could do to him. He tried to wrest the key from Billy's hand, but he forgot he didn't have his gloves on. The iron burned his palms. Pain pierced his body, and Ferry fell on the hard ice of the street. He barely managed to stand and take a few steps back from Billy, who was coming for him. Then he felt someone behind him. Turning around, he bumped into Danny Stevens, Billy's shadow. The large boy caught him in his brawny arms, from which Ferry couldn't escape no matter how hard he struggled. "Danny, hold him still," Billy shouted, running towards them. Ferry saw no way out. The iron's power was too great, making him feel dizzy and weak. All he could see was the key in Billy's hand, coming dangerously close to his face. He closed his eyes and waited for the pain. But nothing happened. All he could hear were footsteps coming closer. And a croak. The force of Danny's arms weakened, and Ferry managed to break free, falling onto the hard ice. Under the street lamp, he saw a silhouette coming from the other side of the street. It looked like a man wearing a black cloak that covered him almost entirely and a tall, black hat. His long black leather gloves reached up to his elbows, and he was holding an ebony walking stick with a raven's head on top. "Let him go," the man commanded firmly. The two boys took a few steps back. Who are you?" Billy stammered, shivering. The stranger came closer. He wasn't very tall, but he looked strong. His cloak covered him up to his ears, with only his red eyes sparkling from under the hat. "It doesn't matter who I am. But if you touch one hair on this boy's head ever again, you will be sorry," he said, pointing his stick at the two boys. "Don't think I can't find you." Billy and Danny were both shivering now. They turned and ran, slipping and falling on the ice before scrambling to their feet again. The stranger helped Ferry up and dusted the snow off his clothes. He smelled like summer herbs. "Are you all right?" he asked. Ferry nodded. "Then you should go home," the man said, turning on his heels and heading towards the end of the street. "You shouldn't be alone at this hour." A black feather fell behind him, glistening on the pristine snow. That's when Ferry knew. "Baldy," he called out. The stranger stopped but didn't turn around. "Baldy, I know it's you," Ferry said. "I just want to thank you." The stranger turned to him. "No, you don't. There are many things you don't know," he said. Then he walked out of sight. To Ferry's surprise, he couldn't hear the stranger's footsteps on the frozen snow anymore. "Baldy, wait." Ferry ran after him. But at the end of the alley, the stranger was nowhere to be seen.